Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Kyren. You can follow all of my content at legendaryupside.com, and a key part of that content, best ball rankings. I am here today with the crew that is helping me make those rankings for Underdog, DraftKings, and FFPC. Daniel Racz, Sackreligious, Kyle Dvorchak, and Conor Driscoll. How you guys doing?
Doing great. Started work for Bleach Report a few days ago, so that's fun, but always happy to be working with LegUp as well.
Congrats on the new gig, Daniel. We're doing good over here. It's officially hot best ball summer now. It was over 100 degrees back-to-back days where I'm at. I went for a short run yesterday without checking the weather and damn near gave myself heat stroke doing a cardio club. So we're drafting indoors for a little bit.
All right. Well, I guess Kyle and Drico, I assume you're doing good. Let's dive into the rankings here. I'm going to share the rankings here that we have up on Legendary Upside. We're going to be mostly talking through the underdog ranks, but I will note that, as I already said, we do have DraftKings, we do have FFPC. The general process here is that we've got our player takes, and then we're adjusting them. One of the key contributions here from the team is that we are adjusting them to DraftKings, where Kyle plays like a lot more volume than I do, to FFPC, where Drico plays. I don't know if the math works. How to do infinitely more, since I really am not playing on FFPC right now. But
I tried really hard to get you to play on FFPC.
You did. No, and I'm gonna be over there because the opportunities are just too good. But yeah. So having the player takes that we generally believe in, and then adjusting it to the specific format. But the underdog ranks are, in a sense, kind of the master ranks that we're adjusting things from there. So those are going to be the ones that I'll be sharing in this podcast. The interested, probably where the draft starts to get interesting, where we start to other than Saquon Barkley, who we're fading, where we start to get a little bit different from the market is probably the late third round. And just want to get your guys' thoughts generally on how you're playing that. Because that's where you're starting to see Kyren fall. You've got LaPorta, you've got Kelce, you've got the quarterbacks who come around in the fourth, but they're kind of all part of that group. But you also got Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell as the wide receiver. Sometimes DJ Moore falls there. So there's this group of receivers I would say we're not in love with, and a lot of temptations at the other positions. Mm-hmm. But if you don't take receivers here in the third, it gets even harder to take them in the fourth. There's not always receivers available to take in the fifth. Then the sixth round, you're taking Joe Mixon, and all of a sudden you've got one or two wide receivers through 6 rounds and your team's dead. So it gets a little dicey if you don't prioritize the receivers here, I think. But there are legitimate temptations here. And how are you guys playing this part of the draft?
I think, like the good Catholic I was raised to be, mostly trying to avoid the temptations. I do think, and I mean, our rankings clearly show this. There's a pretty notable drop off from when you get to the Metcalf, Kupp, Flowers tier, and we list 5 or 6 different players of non-wide receiver positions. And I don't think that's just a quirk of ADP. It's how we feel, is that once Tank Dell is off the board, you are starting to get real thin on guys where you look at them and you say I see how this guy can win me a league. I see how this guy who I flipped the cards in week 17, Tank Dell, yep, guy can rip 150 any given week, and he could probably do it a lot in this offense. So I'm not completely fading the likes of LaPorta, Kelce, Allen, Hurts, who are our specific next tier. But I gotta imagine, I could check my exposure, but I gotta imagine I'm gonna come in just marginally underweight on that group. More so underweight on LaPorta, less so on Kelce. The same could be said for the Allen Hurts combo. But to me, you really start to run thin once you get past this tier of guys we have that are essentially the very end of the third.
Yeah, I would say this is a spot where it's super important to pay attention to what your room's doing. Really what you need is 2 teams. I mean, more than 2 is great, but you need at least 2 teams where they've kind of shown you that they are not aware that this is a wide receiver driven market. And they double tapped running back in the first 2. basically, if the guy who drafted Saquon takes him like at ADP and also had another running back there, like that's one, you're safe there. Then if you get another person that double tapped running back, and then especially if they go like double tap running back, then take Sam LaPorta, you're like, all right, cool. This isn't going to be quite as crazy a wide receiver avalanche as a lot of these drafts are. And if you're at that end of the, you're at the end of the draft board, draft out of the 11 or 12, and you've started 3 wide receivers, then I feel really good about taking Travis Kelce, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Sam LaPorta, and I'm really happy about that setup. But I think one of the best features of our rankings is that we do have Flowers and Dell over those guys, because if you can afford the luxury of getting the first of the elite tight ends through LaPorta or Kelce, or these 2 elite quarterbacks in Allen and Hurts, if that's a luxury that you can afford because you've just hammered 3 wide receivers to start, that's a great position to be in. But if you're in a spot where you're already behind the 8 ball at wide receiver, I think it's really sharp to kind of forego what look like really good picks by value, because they are. It's just that it's going to be really painful at wide receiver if you don't get the firepower early here.
Yeah, I don't think taking them like, and it's not like I took Kelce and I didn't get one of those wide receivers and it ends my team, but like I'm trying to build monsters and pushing these guys past any one of them past ADP. Not like none of them are bad picks. We're like a little behind on LaPorta, 3.7 picks behind ADP. You're going to get him plenty. You'll get him below your 1 out of 12 rate, but he's not a dreadful pick. We're 1 spot behind on Josh Allen. None of these guys are bad picks, but like our rankings.
That's the thing. They're good. They're actually good picks. That's what makes this tough. Individually, every one of these guys, every one of these non-receivers, I think is a good pick. And it's just that building with Sam LaPorta as a 3rd-round pick is hard as hell. It's just really
you can
difficult.
do it, but like it's really hard, where it's like really easy to build a monster when you get a Tank Dell as your 3rd receiver, and then you're pushing for, Kelce fell past ADP. Josh Allen's soup. None of Josh Allen's receivers or tight end have gone before him. I can still find a stack to make it work with him. So I think that's how you build monsters. You can still build really strong teams with a LaPorta in the 3rd, with or LaPorta late 3rd, Kelce we like even at ADP, but like I don't think that's how you build the best team. I'm still sprinkling them in as the late 3rd, but not nearly as much as I want to get myself Dell and Flowers, because I think that's how you build the strongest teams in this drafting environment.
I had a team where I started, like, I think it was Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr., and then the 3rd round's there, and this was probably a week or so ago, and so LaPorta's ADP was higher. He's come down a little bit, but LaPorta was there at the end of the 3rd, and I hadn't seen him falling very much. I was like, I started 2 receivers. I can take LaPorta here, so I took LaPorta, and then it goes around the turn, and Josh Allen's there, and the receivers are gone, and I'm like, this seems crazy to have Josh Allen available in the 4th. So I started 2 receivers. Then I go Sam LaPorta, Josh Allen. Like, I'm good. Comes back in the 5th. All the receivers are gone. And now I'm looking at Dalton Kincaid. I'm like, I can't take you. I can't take Dalton Kincaid here, stacked with Josh. This would be great. He's way past ADP, stacked with my quarterback. But I screwed myself out of what would have been an insane team if I had just passed on Sam LaPorta. And that's the thing that you run into a lot here. And it's what makes these picks tricky. So it's just being cognizant. And that's kind of the thing where I feel like it's easiest to figure that out with experience. But
we're suggesting that you let the market decide which one of these non-wide receivers comes back to you in the 4th. That you don't pick that person and then hope a receiver comes back, that you instead take a receiver, protect yourself that way. And then, because it's like the math of it is you're going to get someone you like that's not a receiver is coming back. Now is there an exception here for Kyren? Like,
yes,
if he falls?
I think at this point, Kyren's injury doesn't seem like it'll be long-term enough to expect him to be a regular fixture of close to the 3-4 turn. So if you can take him, I would make an exception for that. But then if you have the opportunity to take any of the other receivers in the early 4th, even T. Higgins, I think is close enough in conversation. You really want to prioritize them. Not a guarantee, but a priority.
Daniel, where do you think Kyren ends up if this foot kind of just, it basically blows over, normal training camp, still maybe there's a chance Corum gets more work, but we kind of go back to where we were like the day after the draft.
And we thought he was overpriced around then. I think that we feel good that he'll be an early third, maybe late second, but around the 2-3 turn. You probably aren't going to want to take him when you take CMC. But if you open with CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and then are comfortable with any of that tier of receiver, you could take Kyren ahead. Or if you want to prioritize, say you only like Malik Neighbors and Steph Diggs, you probably take one of them, then hope Kyren comes back to you. But 2-3 turn in short.
I think he probably sneaks inside on the inside of that turn, right? I don't think he goes like the early third. I think it's probably closer to the like 22, 23, even 21 spot. Like, I do think the moment we get like, oh, he's at training camp, they didn't put a non-contact jersey on him. Everything looks normal. Like, it's going to be, it can't jump that many picks because we're so early in the draft, but like, that's an immediate, like 2 days later, he's up 3 spots or whatever.
The crazy thing about Kyren is he's one of the only like RB1s on a team that has contingent upside. Because if Blake Corum were to go down with an injury and we're then able to project that Kyren Williams is going to be really similar to his role that he had last year, we were drafting him at the 1-2 turn, when that was the case. So I really like him when he slides to the end of the third here. It just feels like a good opportunity to scoop up a little bit of a dip. And we've seen the ceiling with this guy. And granted, I think like the true ceiling outcomes like we got last season are a little bit lower probability to happen. And I think the absolute like highest ceiling outcomes, just aren't quite as high. So the ceiling's a tiny bit lower and it's slightly lower probability. But the end of the third seems like a pretty appropriate price for this guy who we saw getting the second best workload in the NFL, just short of CMC last year. So.
Yeah, it probably doesn't even have to be the Blake Corum injury either. That's probably the most likely avenue in which Kyren gets back to full Kyren, but also like, the first preseason game, hey, it's a third quarter. When's Blake Corum coming in? Like the moment, Jordan Rodriguez, second fumble in the first day of training camp for Blake Corum, like I think he's probably a good backup caliber running back, but we're also wrong with these guys all the time. Like they could just go out and be like, he wasn't nearly as good as I thought. Like we liked his film. And as it turns out, the moment he got into practice, he had butterfingers. McVay's picky about that and doesn't end up playing him. Injury's probably the most likely way that Kyren gets back to
pass protection was the thing that came up. He mentioned in a positive way, McVay was like, oh, he's a he's a really smart, intelligent player. He learns from his mistakes. One of those mistakes was that he blew up blitz pickup today. So I think that would be one concern.
Yeah,
Jerk,
they like him. So like they seem to like him a lot, but also like we got Doug Peterson last year telling us how great of a pass catcher. He's so underrated. Tank Bigsby was so underrated as a pass catcher. He's probably one of the least efficient pass catchers in NFL history because 2 of the balls that hit his hands turned into interceptions. Straight up hit his hands, turned into interceptions. Like they got the chance to look at him in like it wasn't his college film looked good. They saw him in Jacksonville on the field and they still convinced themselves he was a good pass catcher. Rubber hit the road and dude was god awful at it. Like projecting guys from college to the day they get on the field week 1 is really hard. If it's possible Corum isn't as good as even the Rams think, and if that's the case, like yeah, Kyren's a 1-2 turn guy, and this is where we want to be drafting a guy who has that upside and also has like admittedly a very risky downside.
And to Daniel's point, I think it's probably a short-lived sale. So if you want to mix him in on this side of the board, I think that's a big part of it too. Jerk, I want to ask you about Kelce because he's a guy like I felt like is a priority, but then I have the same issues where when I try to build with LaPorta, and then if I just swap in Kelce, I have the exact same issues. In fact, it's even worse because if Mahomes comes back, then you take Mahomes, and it's like now I've spent my 3rd and 5th round pick on non-receivers, and you start to feel a little bit behind. But he is a guy. He's still going top 20 in the FFPC. One of 3 tight ends, still going top 20. I know he's going at like the 2-3 turn on DraftKings. So underdog is kind of the straggler here to have him. Obviously, it's half point PPR, not 1.5. But the fact that you can get him a pick 38 is a little bit wild to me.
Right, because he used to be a first round pick,
right?
And hasn't been, especially if you ignore the injuries, which are a problem. He has still been very, very good, and he is one of those players where Travis Kelce is a Hall of Famer. So even with the age, you have to discount the age curve just a little bit. So it does seem it does seem strong, but I will say I'm not as in tune with the underdog dynamics. It sounds like if you get caught in the draft where the non-receivers are falling, then it's probably a trap.
Yeah, I think you do want to push him. I kind of have felt the same way where like I wanted him to be a priority, but it's really hard to make him a priority, in part because if we kind of move down, like if you're saying I'm going to go Travis Kelce, and then I'm going to like get your T Higgins, or you can kind of get immediately boxed out and end up with like by our rankings, like a Christian Kirk in the 4th, or like an Amari Cooper, more by ADP in the 4th. There's people that are going to have gone 3 straight wide receivers and gotten Trey McBride in the 4th, or they're going to go 4 straight wide receivers and get Mark Andrews or Dalton Kincaid. And as much as I do really like the elite tight ends this year, it's like, man, I kind of want to push. It's almost like I want to push all the tight ends into the 4th, and then every 4th round pick. And Ben Gretch has kind of made this point where you want to like, so it's like take the receivers and then take all the tight ends like in a row. But at the same time, like Kelce, I think Kelce should still be the tight end 1, like he is over on DraftKings. I think for the PPR purposes, like Dricko, I know you're really into McBride, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the fact that he came on so strong as a second-year player, obviously tight ends, that they break out later, so you still have some ascendancy. You have that somebody that the defenses won't be able to focus on him as much with the receiver pick, Harrison. I get that those seem like pretty straightforward things to say, but that's kind of why I like him so much.
No, I mean if I look at like the tight ends, and I've said this before, but like Kelce and Andrews are the 2 guys who jump out to me the easiest as being the clear number 1s on their own team, because we've seen them be that in the past. Kincaid is actually the other guy that we've moved him up in this update of the rankings, because it's like, man, is that more I like think through it about like what they're going to attempt to do. It does seem like it could just go through Dalton Kincaid. Probably the guy who prevents that is Keon Coleman, but I don't think he prevents that. So I'm just like, if there's, I think, a couple different ways. It's sort of like young ascendant talents, right? You got Sam LaPorta, Trey McBride. I want to be in on young ascendant talents. That's generally a winning archetype. But you also have clear number 1 on their own team with tight end eligibility. And there you have Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, and Dalton Kincaid. I do think that all of these guys are a priority. Where are you guys at on Kincaid?
Yeah, and you mentioned young ascendant talents. Well, Kincaid might be 29 or however old. He's only in his 2nd year in the NFL. So in NFL years, he's quite spry.
I mean, 29 is pretty young by tight end standards. So 2nd year and also not that old for tight end.
I was like the biggest Kincaid bear of our bunch, I think. And even I'm clicking Kincaid. I'm like even with the field on Kincaid right now, which is, that's saying a lot for me. I don't think he's particularly good. I think
you did not like him a month ago.
No, I think from a talent level, like he'd be really, if you asked Dalton Kincaid if he could Space Jam Monstars steal Evan Ingram's talent, he would be like, fuck yeah. Where's that cursed water bottle? Like, how do I take this guy's talent? But the thing is,
I think he has the exact same skill set.
I was actually going to say that's just
he already did that.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe, but that's the point. Like he might just be fancy Evan Engram. Like he could just be like the same thing as Jake Ferguson. Like what's the difference between Dalton Kincaid and Jake Ferguson? They both might be like the 2nd highest target on their team, except Dalton Kincaid has a path to being like literally the highest targeted guy on the Bills, and so that's why I'm down to take him. And yeah, I don't think that we don't need to get too fancy or precise on this. Like all 5 of these tight ends are fantastic bets. And one of the things, Madison Parkhill wrote a pretty good article on the elite tight end thesis. But one of the, I mean, without even getting into like the more complicated stuff, and it's really not all that complicated, but if you just really simply look at historically, what does wide receiver 28 score, or what does wide receiver 25 score in average points per game? Well, it's a lot less than pretty much all these guys have scored through their careers. You know, like you're looking at maybe 10 points per.
The prices are so low that you can literally just go. You don't have to get into all the fancy like the tight end spike weeks in the playoffs, and it's just like literally like I'm pretty sure these guys are going to score more points than the wide receivers, and you know you get the tight end eligibility element. Now, I guess are we now like the boomer, because that's the argument we've used about running backs. So have we become the boomers, but for tight ends?
I don't think so. And then also in support of our tight end argument, the next tier of tight ends, and I don't think George Kittle and Kyle Pitts would qualify as this. I could at least understand the argument for Pitts being in the next year because he hasn't proved anything in the past 2 years. But when you look at the Evan Engrams, the Jake Ferguson down to David Njoku through about round 9 or 10, those tight ends are more expensive than they've been in the past. Like there's less of a difference between the elite tight ends, who we historically are very good at projecting, and the next tier of tight ends. So it's another feather in the cap of the elite tight end strategy this year.
Yeah, that is true. And we were a little bit more bullish on Evan Engram after the draft. And I personally was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Maybe Engram gets some more of that underneath target volume with like Brian Thomas as a field stretcher and that type of stuff. But if you think about the kind of the purpose of elite tight end, and it's really the main thing of like finding the guys who have the single week ceilings to like win you weeks, finding those guys who basically capture bigger percentage of the spike week pie than, you know, you can find later, which is kind of, it starts to get a little bit random after the top guys. Engram isn't really that guy, you know. If anything, Ferguson's more that guy, given what we saw with his stuff around the goal line. But he doesn't have a super high target rate or anything. So it's a little bit more random with Ferguson. And also we only have the 1 year of it. He's kind of like arbitrage George Kittle, really. Kittle and Pitts are probably form their own tier, right? Where they're like, not really elite tight ends, but maybe for a week they are kind of vibes.
George Kittle definitely has given you those elite weeks. Kyle Pitts is really just throwing a dart and hoping you can catch lightning in a bottle. And I understand wanting to catch that after, you know, he's still very young. I think I saw a tweet that at this age, Travis Kelce hadn't caught a pass in the NFL. You know, you get Kirk Cousins, so I can see why it's enticing. But in terms of players that could be a stone zero, Kyle Pitts.
Pat, you look like you liked that one.
I did. Now, Travis Kelce, I guess, was old and they had microfracture surgery or something. He missed his rookie season.
Yeah, his rookie season
entirely.
was a full red shirt, and he probably spent more years in college because he was like, he was a quarterback position switch or something like that, right? So like a little sleight of hand on how that works, but like
it's not. So it's just true. It's just
you don't tell me twice. I want to be.
I don't know if it is actually true, but
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because, like I said, I mean, Pitts was a 3-year player. Kelce was at least a 4-year player, I assume, and yeah, he like basically redshirted his rookie season in the NFL. So like really young, was really productive as a rookie. And it was in one of the most insane outlier, really 3, but like 2-year stretches of play calling, and not as outlier, but still horrific quarterback play. Like you can see how it all comes together. And unlike George Kittle, you can see how it comes together for a full 17 weeks. Like you can see how he just has a wide receiver 2+ caliber target share when the next guy to throw to is Darnell Mooney. Like you can see how it comes together for full 16 weeks or 17, but like you can also understand that Kittle has proven time and time again that he is him. I understand Pitts really hasn't done that in its projection, but the ceiling for a full season is as good. It's probably, you could tell me it's better than Kincaid, and I'd tell myself it's better than Kincaid.
I mean, certainly from a talent perspective, plus enough volume to go around, you could
Right?
Yeah. It's like
The peripheral stuff for Pitts has also usually been really good. Like in terms of the per route stuff, a lot of the advanced metrics on deep targets and stuff like that. That like especially when you look at it per route, that has always been that's always stayed good. You've just had like a really, really bad, like you call it, the outlier macro environment.
And we talked about last year, we're like, oh, these Falcons are so cheap. All we need to do is not have a historically low run rate, like historically low pass rate, one of the lowest of the past 10 years, because that's how cheap everyone's giving this concentrated offense to us. And of course, the way we didn't get there is because they had one of the lowest pass rate over expected is like the past decade. And we know they're going from that to what is probably a meaningfully positive pass rate over expected. Like Kirk Cousins, his coaches throughout the years have had no worries letting him throw early, often throughout the game. It's a relatively like modernized NFL offense under Zach Robinson. Like, what if we move him up a few spots? You know what? What if Pat?
We just had a rankings call before this. So Daniel, if you wanted to share that, if you really believed in your Travis Kelce stat, you would have shared it an hour ago, and we would have him slightly higher. Let's move back to running back. The running backs in this range, we're behind on a bunch of them, but not. It's more just about structure. So like Sack, like you talk about you're potentially getting behind when you take one of the tight ends, which we like. We don't love the running backs in this range as much. Pacheco, we're slightly ahead on. We think he's going to keep moving up. And basically, I feel like we've been behind on him, but it's like if you're going to get some, you might as well get some now, because I do think he moves up. You guys convinced me of that. Jacobs is actually falling. Now, maybe this will be kind of like a May type of puppy-driven dip, and he'll come back up, but I don't mind trying to push him and get him in the 5th. I've gotten a fair, well, not like a ton, but like several shares of Josh Jacobs in the 5th. So I'm definitely willing to take him there, but I would say at this point, maybe try to push him around the wrap and see what that gets you. But when you take, and I like James Cook a lot actually in the 5th, but again, structurally, we are making sacrifices. So how have you been kind of playing it in actual draft, Zach?
Yeah, for Jacobs, he's got to slide a good amount to me, just because the slide has been continuing, and I don't need to catch a falling knife on Josh Jacobs. So I'll take him when he falls. I actually got Isiah Pacheco at pick 60 today. That felt really good. I think that was a pretty crazy outlier, though. I definitely am of the opinion that he continues to move up. There's lots of people that are in the industry pounding the drum for Pacheco as he's underpriced. He needs to move up. And I think part of that is just driven by like a lack of understanding of what's efficient for wide receivers in the market. But it doesn't matter. Like they're still saying it, and that still helps to move the market. And I do think Pacheco is a decent bet at his price. And we definitely don't want to have zero of him. So I'm willing to take him. But for pretty much all of these guys in this range, like starting with Derrick Henry, so Henry, Etienne, Pacheco, Jacobs, all the way through James Cook, I'm really not doing any of those clicks, even at value, unless I'm pretty secure in my structure. So like if I started wide receiver, now the door's open to those running backs, where if I'm getting them at value, and I don't just mean an ADP value, I mean a rankings value for us, then I'm willing to start mixing them in. But there's even times where I've got them at an ADP value, but I'm sitting there at the turn and I'm like, yeah, I can just do the Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson thing, or I could take falling Travis Etienne. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to do Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson with my 3 wide receivers start way more often than I'm going to do Travis Etienne. You can give me David Montgomery in the 7th, and I'm going to be pretty happy about it. So it's just that there's really good running back values later as well. And just the way that the position scores, if you look at the distributions of the running backs that are in this range, they're not meaningfully different than the distributions from the running backs that come later in that real sweet spot of the draft. And that's like the secret for the people that aren't getting it. Like, that's the secret. Like, you might think you're getting a lot, and you're getting a better running back. It's true, but you're getting such a marginally better player and the difference in wide receiver is a chasm. The difference between Cortland Sutton and the guys that are going in the 5th or 4th round is just way bigger than the difference between the running backs that are going here and the ones that go later.
I really hate playing the expensive Chiefs running back game as well. Like, if there's anybody, it's Andy Reid, who's been able to just find random backs like Pacheco and make them really productive. And I get that that's an argument for Pacheco as well, but they also have been pretty volatile. They can be really volatile year to year, where it's some guy we're not even thinking about now who they decide.
It's not going to be CEH. I think that's the beauty of Pacheco this year, is that it's definitely not Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right?
And I am thinking about the guy. His name's Luis Rees-Zammit, and I'm thinking about him, baby.
Luis Rees-Zammit is like 6'3".
He's a special
teams. I think, yeah, he's like.
Wait, you say he's like 6'3" and that's a bad thing? That's awesome.
Yeah, he's not an NFL running back. He might be like a gadget screen guy, but
our generation's Cordero Patterson.
Yeah, I think he could be Cordero Patterson, which maybe he's awesome. So maybe I am.
He was a great running back for a while.
What if he's just Chiefs Taysom Hill? Have you thought of that? I mean, we're wasting time talking about a player who's literally not in the underdog draft pool. So,
yeah.
Is there anywhere we can roster this guy? Like, I don't think.
Oh yeah,
on DraftKings.
Yeah, you can draft him on. He's on DraftKings. He's on FFPC.
Oh hell yeah! I didn't think he was on DraftKings, or he's on DK. I didn't. He's 6'3". David Johnson was 6'1". He's like my favorite player ever.
He's definitely. I mean, he's as irrelevant as he very likely is. He's the kind of guy where if it's at the end of the summer and we're getting news that it's like, it seems that the Chiefs actually like him over Pacheco on passing downs, then or CEH.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, CEH is really, really bad at football. Like,
well, we're drafting CEH, and that's probably we'll get to this conversation more later, but we are taking him because he looks pretty locked into the RB2 role.
I mean, we're having fun talking about this Luis Zammit character, but like literally former rugby star. Like, he cost them nothing because I believe he's an international pathway player, so he doesn't even cost a roster spot. Those guys, you get like an extra roster spot just to have them, like, they're free to roster essentially. So like, we're having fun talking about this guy, but I have a bag and a half of CH, man.
What about, like, I literally just looked up the Chiefs roster. What about Keontae Engram and Deneric Prince? Like, they're gross, but they're not the exact type of running back that Andy Reid says, yeah, you'll do. I know how to use you.
Yeah, but like, does he? Will he use them? Like, I know
maybe not those particular people, but
yeah, those.
My main point is used. That's why I don't like paying for the expensive one. Yeah,
and I think
it's like maybe the favorite, but not as strong against the field as he should be.
Yeah, I think with Pacheco, our hope, and I think it's a reasonable expectation, is just there's going to be so much steam for him. You know, if you're building projections and his competition is Clyde Edwards-Helaire and a rugby player whose name I'm not going to even try to pronounce, then he's just going to project as a late third-round player, probably at the worst. And, you know, Chiefs running back week 1 has shown enough talent over a 2-year sample for the market to want to take that player in the 3rd round generally, even accounting for this running back environment. I think this is a typical early 4th round pick at the latest. So I'm more just surprised the market is allowing him to be a late 4th player, and we're trying to get ahead, though I don't think we anticipate overall hoping that subs are holding a significantly overweight portion of Pacheco.
Yeah, we were behind, so you won't have a lot if you've been drafting out the rankings. I think, you know, maybe we'll, you know, kind of continue to shuffle around in this range a little bit as we get a better feel for, is he actually coming up or not? Or, you know, is Jacobs now recovering, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But I think mixing him in is probably, if you haven't been taking him, I would mix some in because this price is fine. It's fine. Is it great? No, but it's a lot better than if you have to pay a third round. I won't. I just won't. So, I mean, seriously, like if he's at the 402, I won't have any. So you might as well, where you can, pick 46, you can get him in there, and get some exposure without like too much opportunity cost, I would say. If we go down to the next tier of running backs, I think is a little right. Let's talk about the next two tiers kind of in tandem here. So we have Mixon, Rachaad White, and Walker. To me, these are our all right. It's the 6th round. I need a running back. This seems pretty great, but also not priorities. If I'm not getting out of structure for these guys, but often if I'm in structure, I'm actually pretty excited to take definitely Mixon and Walker at the end of the 6th. The White is more like, sure, if he's in the 6th, I'll mix him in. He generally goes in the 5th though. Then we get to Kamara, Jones, David Montgomery. These are the guys. It's the exact same thing except the 7th. I push them into the 7th. If I'm getting them in the 7th and I'm in structure, I need a running back. I feel pretty great. But if I'm not feeling like I need a running back, I have this sweet spot that we'll talk about a little bit more who you guys like there. But thoughts? Is that how you guys see it too? That this kind of like push these guys to the 6th, push these guys to the 7th?
Yeah, I don't think any of us have super strong thoughts on any of these running backs.
And if they are, they're negative. None of the ones we're not like, well, you see this guy we're really excited for. It's yeah, they're all fine except Rachaad White. That guy is bad, which that's mine. That's negative. He has to fall so far beyond ADP. Whereas like I can see it with Joe Mixon. He's not dreadful. I think he's like fine-ish, and he plays for the Texans, who I expect to score a ton of points. It's fine. I don't hate that one. I'm struggling to get there with Rachaad White. Yeah.
You give me Mixon versus like ETN straight up.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Like,
yeah, give me Mixon over Jacobs too. I'm good with that.
Yeah, that one feels even better.
To give a little context, because Rachaad White's going to be one where there's people that hear you say, "Oh, Rachaad White's bad," and people are going to point to what he did last season and say, "What are you talking about? He was a league winner last year." And the problem with Rachaad White and league winners of his ilk are there is no talent mode. So it doesn't take anything. I call them churn backs because they just every year there's a risk that this guy just gets churned and he is no longer the guy that you thought he was, because he didn't actually do anything. He just was there. He was right place, right time. And Rachaad White has a little bit of receiving chops, which really that helped buoy him a lot last year. He did a lot with what he was given there. But that's why you're saying Rachaad White is bad. It's the talent, the lack of talent mode is scary, because right now it's just all projected touches, but that's just really fragile. And the less talented you are as a running back, the more fragile it is. And Rachaad White was downright bad as a rusher. If you can go and look at any like advanced metric as a rusher, and he was not good. If you go into those 7th round running backs though, those are ones where oftentimes I'm seeing a value on, I'll get Kamara, he slides, he's a value according to the ranks and according to ADP. Aaron Jones, he slides, he's a value according to ranks and ADP. Montgomery, I don't get as much sliding. I got a couple shares recently where he slid almost a full round, and that felt really nice. But the way that I see these is you kind of got the good, the bad, and the ugly here, where Aaron Jones is actually efficient and good. The scary thing is he's getting older and he's probably not going to get a ton of volume. But if you think of Aaron Jones as really diet, old, like stale Devon Chan, like that's the archetype where, yeah, we're not saying that Aaron Jones is going to compile all this stuff throughout the season and put up a huge stat line. But what I am saying is there's a week where Aaron Jones just gets 3 touchdowns because you just can. And that's the bet with Aaron Jones.
And does. The dude.
Yeah, he does. He did last year. He had a bunch of injuries last year. He's like, guess what? I'm still really good. Here's a bunch
played
of
really well against the Cowboys.
Really well.
I think last year it didn't happen, but there was like a 3 or 4 year streak where week 2, Aaron Jones was the best running back in football. Just he had multiple straight years where second week of the season, Aaron Jones is dropping 25 or 30 points, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and so so that's the thing with Aaron Jones. For Kamara, he's just bad now. Kamara is Rachaad White, where they both suck as runners, but they're serviceable to good as receivers. And they both
Kamara's
have
probably better as a receiver still at this point in his career.
Yeah,
honestly, than Rachaad White
he's
is.
just white. He's white, but like 6 more wide receivers are off the board.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even like sometimes 8, 10. Like it's
One note on White and the projectable volume. Some of the coaching comments have not been great, where they said we changed the scheme, and I don't know if this scheme suits him so much. Like he's very patient behind the line, sometimes too patient.
Oh, I love this.
He's
Feed
like,
my hater
we
energy.
need our running back to like be fast and get there quickly.
Okay, let's not Bucky Irving, to be fair. He's slow.
Well, then they drafted Bucky Irving, yeah.
Yeah, but
on tape, he doesn't look like a bad athlete. Like, all of the stuff was good.
It's a little Kyren-esque where he's actually a productive, undersized, but productive, versatile college back, and then he tested really poorly, but then he's still got okay draft capital. So, yeah, Bucky is, I don't know if we'll get to Bucky, but he's, I think, a really good pick. Bucky's a really good pick.
You heard it here first, folks. Bucky Irving is this year's Kyren Williams.
But as Rico said, this was coach speak, but it was also coach action. At the end of last year, they tried to move heaven and earth to not give all these touches to Rachaad White. They wanted to ease the burden. They tried Chase Edmonds, but that didn't work. I believe Edmonds got hurt early into his late season return last year.
Yeah.
They then they draft Bucky Irving. So I think all their actions point the same way as their words, and the actions will speak louder. I've also had many youth basketball coaches talk about how they're changing the scheme, and then listening to the reports like, oh, that sounds like they're giving me less work. And, that was the right decision. We'd win more games. So I would assume that the Bucks are trying to do the same thing with Rachaad. No disrespect to him.
No disrespect, but he is basically the equivalent of Daniel playing youth basketball. All right. Where are we going? Jonathan Brooks, Ramondre Stevenson, Jalen Warren. This kind of kicks off what we see as the next tier of backs. Brooks going behind Stevenson and ADP, but we've got him leading the group from the rankings perspective. Jalen Warren similarly going in pick 90, but we've got him at 85. So we, a little bit jumbled compared to the ADP, but I think overall this is kind of the spot to target running backs. Let's talk quickly about the receivers as we get into this range. Like how many receivers do you want when you hit this spot of the draft? What are you doing if you have less than that?
Minimum 4. If you have less than 4, you're pushing the plane. If you have less than 4, you're in big trouble. And then you're pretty much always taking JSN, Christian Watson, Deontay Johnson, Rashee Rice over that previous end of the running back tier, the David Montgomery, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones. You're just like, I'm running back blind. I don't see you. You don't exist. I need to get my 4th wide receiver here. There are times where I've drafted what felt like a really good team, and I only had 3 wide receivers coming into here. And it might have been that I started 3 wide receivers, and they're strong picks. But I just kept getting given really big value picks at non-wide receiver positions. And now I'm here. And then you're staring down like, do I really take Jameson Williams as my 4th receiver over all these much better choices? And I like Jameson. I'm probably of our group the most bullish on Jameson Williams. And I'm still not, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound like a good idea for, if you're attempting to win money at this. If you're trying to pick guys that make you happy, then sure, you can click Jameson Williams. But yeah, I think you just got to have 4 here.
Let me kind of run this as a counter. So let's say you have Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook. So you have 3 receivers. Then you went, you got 4, 5, 6. You got Cook coming back in the 6th. Okay. So now you're in the 7th, and you take one of these falling guys. You get Alvin Kamara comes all the way to the end of the 7th. So you grab Kamara, your RB2. Now you're in the 8th. Why can't I grab one of these guys? Go to 3. Why can't I grab another one of these guys? Go to 4. I did start wide receiver, right? I've got Cook, Kamara, Jonathan Brooks, and James Conor. Okay? I'm done. I did hyper fragile, but I started with the 6th round. So I've taken a strategy that has had some history of success where, traditionally with hyper fragile, you might go running back, tack one more on in the 10th or even later, right? But here you're going running back. You're almost doing a 0 running back build to your first running backs in the 5th or 6th, but you grab 4 guys before like the end of the 9th or the end of the 10th, and you're done. And then what did I cost myself? I cost myself JSN, Christian Watson, Deontay Johnson, Jameson Williams versus Khalil Shakir, Rashid Shaheed, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Jerry Jeudy, Josh Downs, Jacoby Myers, Dontavian Wicks.
I think that's viable. But here's the thing. Number one, you're talking about a thin rope, a thin beam you got to walk on here. You're done at running back. No matter how sick the values are that come to you,
you're done.
Unlucky for you, you're locked out. So I don't love that aspect of it, because there can be some spots where you're like, man, this would be an insane pick if I were allowed to make it.
Which is a weakness of hyperfragile as a strategy in general, is that you lock yourself out. You burn all your flexibility. So
but you can make one small change to that and still draft 8 of your 9 picks will be the same. The difference is I don't take Alvin Kamara in the 7th there. He's a value. He's a big value. I only have 3 receivers. I've got the Bills stack thing that I did with Kincaid, Allen, and Cook. But what I do instead is I take the receiver there. Like, ideally, it's Rashee Rice, and Rashee Rice is my 4th receiver. And then I'm facing your hyper fragile team. I probably don't have, the difference is Alvin Kamara versus Rashee Rice 1v1. And I'm saying, like, hey, how about instead I just take one of these late running backs that I really like with probably more upside than Alvin Kamara even, it's a lower floor, that I'm going to get, and it's not going to work as often as Alvin Kamara works. But that's the way that I would play it differently. But I don't think it's not impossible to do it the way that you suggested.
I think what you're getting at there, though, is when you make that pick that ends your flexibility, your draft flexibility, you don't want it to just be an okay value. You do want it to be a really good value, because your opportunity cost is your flexibility.
Yeah, and I think there's so many situations in these drafts where you go, this, but let me trade that running back I took first. This, but my first running back's a receiver. And I don't really care who. You tell me. Anyone in the range is fine. Just let me trade that capital out. And it's the first guy. It's not the last guy, right? What you actually have control over. And I think even Kamara in the late 7th can be like that guy where you're like, man, I'm so much better off if I just have, JSN here, and then I can, because the 2v2 on the Kamara, right, or the 1v1 compared to a running back that you might get later, it's like Kamara versus Brian Robinson. I'm like, I kind of like Brian Robinson. It's just, that's fine. Like, sure, you'd take Kamara first, and he goes way earlier, so ADP value, whatnot. But like, it's just not. It doesn't give me like that much of an advantage, I think, over the running back is available like 4 or 5 rounds later. So yeah, I think generally you do want to try to prioritize the wide receiver, but the room has put me in this spot where it says you're taking a wide receiver 20 picks ahead of ADP now, and I'm just like, I won't. I'll go hyper fragile in this range. I'll come back and grab Mike Williams. I'll come back and grab Rashid Shaheed. You can build it through. The reason I brought up Allen is that there's a couple ways to do this. I'd say there's 3 ways to really do this. One is Allen. You're grabbing Coleman. You're grabbing Shakir. You're grabbing Curtis Samuel. Part of the reason you got out of structure was to take correlated pieces, maybe with Kincaid or Cook. The other guy is Richardson. You prioritize Eddie Mitchell. You prioritize Josh Downs. You've also got Giants stabs on the other side of that game. You can take a Darius Slayton. It's not the most exciting thing ever, but like as far as like wide receiver kind of punts that are correlated later, you got a Slayton, you got a Hyatt, you got a Wandale. So the Colts set up well for it. And then the other one is the Packers, because you can go Jordan Love, you can come back and get Romeo Doubs, you can come back and get Zontavian Wicks, and then you go into Musgrave and Marshawn Lloyd as like you've pushed a running back. Maybe your RB4 ends up being Marshawn Lloyd or something like that after getting 3 running backs in this range. So that's been my experience of if I say I'm putting my foot down, I'm not taking Curtis Samuel at pick 80. Okay. I'm just not. I'm taking one of these running backs. If I have one of those quarterbacks, or even if I go get Jordan Love and do you add the guys after, kind of do an early backdoor stack with Love, that works okay. It's maybe not my thing I would be looking to do when I go into a draft, but I think it works okay.
Yeah, I did a Love stack today where, I had CMC. I was at the 1 hole. Love fell to the 8-12. And I was like, oh, that's good. I know I'll be able to get almost certainly Dontavian Wicks at the 120, 121. Then I took Musgrave 144, 145. And it worked out well. Also had Aaron Jones before for a little week 17 correlation. I think you could also throw the Chargers in there. Obviously, you have Lad McConkey, but you can take Justin Herbert. You can add a running back of choice. You prioritize Josh Palmer, obviously. You can take Quentin Johnston because, like, in theory, he's correlated. But, like, you have to run routes on the team to, like, accrue points. So I'm not sure how bullish even on those teams I will be on Quentin Johnston, but to each their own.
Yeah, I'm not really taking Johnston even when I'm doing the Chargers. But the Chargers are a really good one because it also, it gives you the Patriots. So you can tack on Patriots receivers late too, which I like doing generally. But you get it correlated that way. The potential, if there's one receiver in this range who kind of might be the key, right, to unlocking some upside, and it doesn't have to be a stacked situation, it's Rashee Rice, right? We get Rashee Rice here. It picks, we have him ranked 77. He's got an ADP of 82.8. If you feel good about Rashee Rice there, Drico, you can get him almost outside the top 100 on FFPC. So, right,
you would be sickened to see the Rashee Rice prices on FFP Superflex, where it's like the 10th round or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 97.2 is his ADP over on FFPC. I mean, that's nuts. But like, even on Underdog, where he's going, and DraftKings is very similar, 82.8 on Underdog and 81.4 on DraftKings. So, I mean, I know we're taking on a risk, but I feel like things have started to move in the other direction a little bit on Rice, where like we're, the second incident seems to have blown over. And the first incident is obviously going to lead to a multi-game suspension of some sort. A lot of uncertainty there. But especially as we talk through, like, man, it would be really nice if there was a wide receiver going in the 70s or 80s who provided a ton of upside that allowed us to make up for flexibility that we lost by scooping a value at running back, quarterback, or tight end early in the draft. That would be huge. It feels worth the risk to me to bet on Rashee Rice at this price. Where are you guys at?
Well, especially if you're playing in a large field tournament, you should be comfortable taking on risk, and especially on a type of risk where it could just come back in that the suspension is less than we thought, or it's only a 5-game suspension, and the rest of the 12 games are awesome. Like, I do think when you're talking large field rather than like a cash game or something like that, like it does seem pretty decently weighed in your favor when the worst that can happen is you lose your entry fee.
Yeah, I think, is there going to be a single person here with less than like 25% up until we know the suspension? That will change his ADP, and our interpretation of it will likely change interpretation of his price. Seriously though, is there going to be anyone less than 25?
My answer depends on one question. Pat, is this podcast getting posted for free? Is everyone gonna see this, or is this subscribers only?
This is everyone.
All right, don't click Rashee Rice. No, I mean, in all seriousness, this is probably the best click on the board. If you are endeavoring to win money playing this game, this is the place you click.
Yeah, like Drico said, like we're playing to win first. Like we are hardly even playing to get second. So much of it is how do you get to the top of the top of the top of a leaderboard that is so long, and like the most obvious way to do it is Patrick Mahomes, wide receiver 1, who broke out with an elite rookie season. Hopefully it's 5. If it's more, like 5 is fine. Like at this,
good.
5
What's that going to cost me? A 4th, 5th round pick?
Yeah, he's the wide receiver.
Even with the 6-game suspension, wouldn't that be like a 4th, 5th round pick?
I was gonna say like 6 feels fine, and from like all of the legal prognostication on Twitter, it's like, yeah, this isn't something that's costing him the season. Like, I think we've mentioned this before in the show, or maybe you mentioned on ship chasing, like what if he's never playing football again? Like that sort of immediate, it's all burning down fear, especially that happened when the second incident happened, which like viscerally, I feel that. I understand that feeling, but realistically, that is nothing close.
We cooled off. We saw how bad it was going to get. We cooled off for a couple. Zach put in the Discord, we're not taking Rashee Rice today. We're seeing how low this
National
goes.
Not taking Rashee Rice Day.
Yeah, which I think was the right approach because we wanted to see kind of where things headed if this continued to spiral. But it's sort of, not to say it's a good situation, it's not. But like, this guy's never going to play football again. Are you crazy? Has cooled down. I also think like I've seen stuff where they're like, is it even in the first 5 games he's going to get suspended? Is he going to push this and then blow it and get suspended at the end of the season? Like, no, that's not how that's going to go. That's never how this goes. But like, there's some fear that could, so I think you're almost getting like when he gets suspended 5 games or 6 games, his price will rise. I feel actually pretty confident about that. I think he'd have to get suspended like 8, 9, 10 games for his price not to rise from here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I initially was thinking that, a 6-game suspension would probably keep his price in check, maybe lower it the tiniest of pick movements. But now I'm with Pat. I think that so many people are unrealistically projecting the range of outcomes. This is, unless it would break every precedent we've seen this century, this is a likely 5 to 8 game suspension, maybe 4, maybe 3 games, but this is our realistic range of outcomes. And again, we are not playing a game where most of the prize money is given up in the first 8 weeks. And unless Rice's suspension is like every other game, so he misses weeks 1, 3, 5, which again has never happened, I feel pretty comfortable absorbing the hit of early season production in a game where you play for late season upside.
And look, think about the environment we're in. We got Rome Odunze, okay, top 10 wide receiver, but uncertain path to targets. Lands with a really good, but rookie quarterback. Target competition is very tough. He's going in the 6th round. Ladd McConkey, 2nd round pick, not a bulletproof prospect profile, pretty good. Totally empty depth chart, going in the 6th round. The really good prospects are going in the 1st round of the 1-2 turn in Marvin Harrison and the 3rd round in Malik Neighbors. So, you're paying up for the high-end wide receiver prospect profiles. When we get down into like this range, the rookies are all the high-end ones that we're excited about are all gone. Even Keon Coleman's gone by the time we're talking about Rashee Rice. And then you kind of get down to guys that we're a little bit more uncertain about in your Xavier Legette, in your Ricky Pearsall's, like how much playing time is he even going to see? A.D. Mitchell, right? He's generating some buzz, but kind of a boom bust type of prospect profile. Jalen Polk, who I'm taking a ton of because he's a lot cheaper, but like, is he definitely a starting wide receiver on and if he is, he's on the Patriots, kind of thing. So the late season upside that these rookie wide receiver profiles have typically provided us is more expensive. Not in every single case, but in a lot of cases, it's more expensive. what can I get later at wide receiver that I'm saying is drying up? What can I get? It's some of that late season upside because that's what's getting really priced up. What can I get? Mike Williams, Cortland Sutton, Tyler Lockett, Jacoby Myers, right? I can get these guys that I'm like, these dudes they have jobs, they run routes. They're not winning me weeks, but like, if you have 6 weeks of Tyler Lockett, 6 weeks of Mike Williams, plus a Rashee Rice, like that all of a sudden feels pretty good to me. Like I can actually get through those early season weeks in a way that's you would think would be harder given how expensive wide receivers are. But the wide receiver profiles that are getting left that no one really cares about are kind of not entirely, but a lot of them, like a Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer pairs pretty damn well with Rashee Rice, right? He's the guy that you can get later, So I don't know. I'm like, in this environment, I don't even think I'm getting like punished for taking a Rashee Rice as one of my wide receivers. In fact, he's sort of what is getting unlocked by this group of wide receivers that is otherwise doesn't have a ton of utility, but they're pretty helpful if I'm trying to get Rice through an 8-game suspension. Are you guys taking any of these guys, or am I just on the olds by myself?
I take Mike Williams a decent amount. I like taking Rashid Shaheed, and I'll take Josh Palmer. I end up why I end up with so much Josh Palmer? It's because he goes in an area of the draft where there starts to be such a huge gap between the next wide receivers available at ADP that we like. There's a couple guys in there. Well, for me, I guess I've
we like ahead of ADP, but
I've artificially created a gap. Yeah, because Jerry Jeudy, much like his quarterback, is not interested in playing football anymore. I mean, Jerry Jeudy was last interested in playing football like 3 years ago. He has exactly zero effort or desire whenever he steps on the football field, and I just don't need players like that on my team. Because all of the all the air yards that Jerry Jeudy didn't convert and all the opportunities and everything, like those are all great. They'd be fantastic if Jerry Jeudy would finish his route, like if he actually put the effort in and finished a play, he could convert some of them, but he doesn't, so he won't. And for those reasons, I'm out.
But Jeudy is one of the guys for me where I'm like, Jeudy, they gave him a contract. They're going to see what they have. They probably don't like what they have by about week 8. I hope I have Rice by then.
In all seriousness, I have clicked Jerry Jeudy a couple times. Now, granted, I've done over 600 drafts so far. And I probably have 3 teams with Jerry Jeudy on them. But there are certainly times where it's there are no wide, am I really going to reach all the way for am I going to reach for Jalen Polk here? Because I'm going to get Jalen Polk to come back to me anyway. And he's who I do want. But do I need to, why don't I just take Jerry Jeudy and Jalen Polk? Those are the times when I take Jerry Jeudy, when I know that the guy that I actually want is coming back to me anyway.
This group of running backs, I would say, to me, kind of, there's sort of there's sort of little mini tier breaks, but probably by the time Chase Brown and Gus Edwards are off, I would say it's sort of the sweet spot of oh man, these are some really strong profiles for these prices is over. I think Blake Corum is fine, but I don't know that he's unusually priced. Whereas a lot of these guys ahead of them are, right? These are prices we're not used to seeing, even by last year's standards. These are pretty juicy prices for the touches and for some of the upside as well. So this is just a really good range to take running back. Kind of where I asked before, when you're headed into this pocket, how many wide receivers do you want? How many running backs are you trying to have coming out of this pocket?
As many as possible, in short. Depends what side of the board you're picking at. But if I'm at the 7-8 turn, if I need a relevant quarterback, I'm happy to take the quarterback. If, Dak and Jake Ferguson pair, so you can do that. But if I can get 2 of those running backs, I'm happy. Ideally, it's at least 1 in most cases.
Yeah, I think to Daniel's point, like this is the hammer zone, especially drafting on DraftKings, where like somehow, even though wide receivers are scoring more points, it doesn't seem to have entirely matched the receiver thirst of underdog. Where like on DK especially, but even on underdog here, I don't like on underdog. I don't love the price I have to pay to get the wide receivers, but in turn, it does mean I do love the prices, like you said, of the profiles we can get this late in the draft, which is also part of why I really want to enter here with 4 to 5. Like Zach said, 4 is like, okay, that's enough. Like that is the bare minimum you can do to get here. 5 is really much a more preferable number because I want to be hammering these guys. Like you said, getting Jonathan Brooks this late, who, albeit a late season play, a very strong prospect on a team where the competition is Miles Sanders, who was like a non-functional NFL running back, and Chuba Hubbard, who's fine, low investment from a previous regime. Like you can see a world in which week 8 comes through and we're getting weekly RB1 performances from a guy like Jonathan Brooks. Raheem Mostert in years past is like a 4th, 5th round pick because everyone sees how many touchdowns he scored and they say, oh, well, he'll do it again. We have, I'd say, not only reasonably priced in touchdown regression, but probably more so than reasonably given how much the wide receivers go up, where you can get, like Pat said, really strong ceiling outcomes both from a weekly and a season-long outlook in this range. So I'm not even opposed to like triple tapping right here if I've already shored up my receiver room. And the hope is that how much I like these running backs, I hope I have, and I typically have.
Yeah, that's an important caveat. If you've shored up your wide receiver, that affords you the opportunity to look at these running backs. And on most specifically, there are sites mostly redraft focused that have him as, a 2-3 turn, early 3rd pick. So once you get to your home leagues, Raheem Mostert is going to be gone. The top 40, top 50 picks, the underdog people have regressed it so much that we might be pushing the envelope on if we've over-regressed it. I'm not sure I ever want to assume we've over-regressed something when we know we want to regress it. But boy, this is the closest we've been to that in my memory.
Yeah, no, and I think Mostert and Conor were the 2 guys where I was like, I don't know, like they're old and geez, what if the bottom falls out? And it's like, dude, okay, but like you're getting these guys as like your RB3 or RB2 with like a really good RB1, and it's like pick 92. Like just do it. Like these, I mean, Mostert could score a ton of touchdowns again. Conor was really good last year. They drafted a 3rd round running back who is exciting, but also has never really been a workhorse. And so, like, is he going to take the job completely from James Conner in year 1? Like, probably not. So, I don't know. Conor and Mostert, I've come around on. We're ahead of ADP on both. I think they're pretty clearly targets at these prices. And I'll note that this pocket of the draft does exist on the other sites as well. As Kyle noted, it's almost even more extreme on DraftKings.
I think it is.
Yeah. Brian Robinson, you can get super late. I've got Javonte Williams at 120 in a draft. His ADP is 107 here, but that's a little later than on Underdog. Robinson, Spears, Chase Brown, 126. Like, this is a really rich range on DraftKings, and it's a pretty rich range on FFPC as well, it looks like. So, Brian Robinson, 105. Tyjae Spears 104. I guess it's like moved up a little as FFPC tends to do with running backs, but it's still like a strong range to be attacking running back in the 80s and 90s, regardless of where you're playing.
It is pretty crazy that you can get the FFPC wide receivers where you're smashing it for the first 7 rounds, and then you get to these guys at running back, and you just don't feel punished. I don't feel punished on FFPC at all at running back. Where like
this almost looks the most straightforward to me. Where you like, and to kind of bring it back, Jerko, to the conversation earlier, like I wouldn't feel like I need to be really tempted at to move away from wide receiver early, because then the running backs dry up a little sooner, right? So I would almost want to get my wide receivers and then hammer running back really hard.
Right. Yeah. Pretty much, where you're able to get superstar receivers for longer in FFPC, and I do think you should be mixing in more early tight ends than even before. But I used to feel bad when I was getting my first running back in like the 9th round or the 8th round. I don't feel bad at all. I feel zero discomfort. Given that you can get these guys who could be like easily the RB1 on their team for the entire season.
That is
you
the
can get
plan.
multiple.
Jonathan Brooks, they are planning to do that, right? Ramondre Stevenson, that is like the plan. I know he's not, but that's the plan. The plan.
Right.
One of Harris or Warren, like that's, these guys are going to get, and there is so much volume potentially that it's like, who cares who's the 1A, who's the 1B? There's Mostert, like Pollard, Moss. Like, I mean, there's guys that like the literal plan is for them to be the RB1. Normally we're like, yeah, but he's going in the 5th and there's way too much opportunity cost. That's like normally the counter, but like, God, what's the opportunity cost here?
Imagine showing like 2016 young RotoViz writer Pat Kerrane or whatever, like, oh yeah, Najee Harris is my RB1, and they're like, oh, that's sick. Oh no, I drafted him in the 8th round. He goes for 1,200 yards every year. He's not very good, but like, he literally goes for 1,200 yards on 300 touches every year, and I took 6 receivers before him. Like, part of the reason,
I think I would have said we won.
Yeah, I know exactly. Part of the reason, we would like that. Like, I'm sure Zero RB got so much, was like so polarizing back in the day when it was more popular, because you did have to take actual bums as your running back 1, and it was still a good strategy. But boy, was it ugly. It's like pretty good looking now.
It's pretty good looking. Yeah, that's the wild thing. The answer for me on terms of how many running backs I want to come out of here ideally would be 3. I think it depends on your structure for sure, right? You come out of here with 2, totally fine. Not a concern to me. Come out of here with 1. I hope it's McCaffrey. I hope you passed everyone because you have McCaffrey. That's like a little thin, but listen, if you came out of this range with 1 and then you tack on, that's maybe where I would look. I would just double tap the Cowboys backs as my RB2, basically Cowboys back RB2. And then, you tack on like 3, guys in the kind of the Ty Chandler zone. Okay. I think you
one
can
of the reasons that people may not, may struggle to double tap or triple tap running back in this range is because they're targeting the quarterback. One of the quarterbacks here is one of their stack guys, and then especially on FFPC where you need tight ends, and there are tight ends in this range, and sometimes people just pick them up. To me, that sort of points to, and maybe I'm just wrong here, but I'm not getting a lot of the quarterbacks in this range because I do want to stack up the running backs, and I have very often been pushing quarterback. I'm not sure if that's right, but it's how I've been playing it.
I think there's kind of 2 really good paths to play because of, and it's just a combination of all of the market prices. It's just the landscape that we're in right now. You can either avoid the quarterbacks in this range and really hammer those running backs and try and get 3 from that sweet spot, or have 1 early and get 2 from the sweet spot. And so you can either take one of the elite quarterbacks, right? Any of the guys basically through Richardson or even through Burrow, because Burrow, he's not an elite quarterback, but he's definitely got ceiling, and he goes kind of right before this window of running backs that you're really wanting to hammer. And then you can kind of rest on your laurels at quarterback and say, I spent a bunch of capital. If I'm winning the tournament, it's because of this guy that I spent up on. And now I'm going to hammer the running backs. And that does a couple things for you. Number 1, it gets you the really good values at running back that we're hoping to scoop up here. And then number 2, if you did have a second quarterback that is a stacking partner in this range, it just helps you be disciplined in pushing them. A lot of times I'll do this with Tua, where I get some of my favorite Tua teams are, I got, Tyreek and a wide receiver in the 2nd and Achane in the 3rd. And then I did Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson. And then I hammered wide receiver. And then now I'm getting into this running back sweet spot. And I'm just clicking the running backs till they run out, till these couple tiers here are just gone. I'm going basically through Chase Brown, Gus Edwards. If there's a running back on the board, I'm clicking them. I mean, even into the Cowboys guys and Charbonnet, for me, I'm like, I want those guys. Really, after Charbonnet is where I'm starting to say, like, okay, there might be some quarterback values that I'm interested in taking here over some of the running backs, especially because I've probably just gotten 3 or 4 running backs in a row. And then if Tua's there, or your stacking partner, Trevor Lawrence is there, Brock Purdy's there, Jared Goff is there, and you've got their wide receiver to stack up, that feels great. And you've just helped to discipline yourself to really get that falling value. But my favorite drafts, honestly, look like they've got 4 or 5 running backs, or even 6, just in a row in the middle of the board. And I call those my Shrek turd drafts, because you just got this big green log sitting in the middle of your board. and that's, I mean, to me, that's what I want. I just want to see, like, how big a Shrek turd can I put in the middle of this board.
How long did it take you to come up with that nickname?
I actually started doing it last year.
No, we think these are good ways to draft, and money is green. And yet
we're doing Shrek turds.
Yeah. Like, oh, what if you're like, oh, I'm trying to put a band in the middle of the draft. Like, I'm trying to get a band right in the middle. A whole bunch of green. I'm trying to stack up green right there. Because we're doing this to try and make money. And yet you call it a Shrek, what is it? DreamWorks Studios Shrek 2 turds. Come on.
Hey, don't say Shrek 2 around these parts.
We'll just see. We'll see which phrase catches on with the people. We'll see if they like stacking up the bands, or we'll see if they like dropping a big Shrek turd.
We know which one they're gonna like. It's not the bands.
No.
I mean, on a less graphic note, I think that while the default early is to take those wide receivers, my default in this running back window is to just take green. I'm not going to use the word Zach said, but I want to just my default to make it a running back selection, and then I have to be convinced to move off it. So I can be convinced if I need a quarterback stack, there's some other correlation, but my null is, let's see who the best running back is and decide from there.
Yeah, I think that's good for a lot of the structure we're saying. It's like, I'm probably still trying to take receivers at the 3-4 turn, but like, if I think I can work, a Baltimore stack in there, like a meaningful Lamar and Andrews, or the same with Kincaid and Josh Allen. You can push Kincaid farther, obviously. Like, if I think there is a compelling reason to do so, I can get the highest scoring quarterback and his number 1 wide receiver who just happens to get tight end eligibility. I actually will break structure for that. If I see the RB13 fall 4 picks below ADP, that's not a compelling reason to break the structure.
That's a great way to frame it, yeah.
I got myself off track and didn't even finish my thought. I said Drico had a really good point that there's 2 viable ways to play this, where you're taking the elite quarterback, then hammering the running backs. The other side of the coin is in that 4th round and 5th round area, where there's those running backs where, like, you get a Derrick Henry or an Isaiah Pacheco or a Travis Etienne, or even if you took one earlier, really it's just any running back earlier than those guys. I'm oftentimes then saying that's what's allowing me to not hammer this running back area quite as hard. And then I'm going to be getting my first quarterback in this range, because I had to pass on the elites because I made the trade-off to stay in structure at wide receiver, and I took a running back, so I couldn't really afford to take that quarterback there.
Yeah, and one of the things about this range of the draft, and when you look at a guy like Ramondre Stevenson, for example, and Ramondre's not the most fun click. The rookie quarterback, not a good offensive line. He wasn't that good last year. Antonio Gibson's there.
Backing up Antonio Gibson.
It's not ideal. Kind of a classic dead zone running back. The difference being that he isn't actually going in the dead zone. He's going, when the wide receivers, basically almost like 50 wide receivers are already off the board. Like 50. Before it might have been like 20. That, like, when we're talking about like the old school dead zone, it's like twice as many wide receivers or more are going off the board before we're thinking about this profile now. And at the same time, I think we do want to think about the profile somewhat similarly to when we did then, or when we did maybe, let's say, couple years ago, Mike Leone was making the case for some of these backs. Was like, look, these touches can be useful in best ball. These touches can help fill weeks at the running back position. We don't want to discount them completely. But if you get a Ramondre as your RB2, and I shared a team on Twitter where I took Achane as my RB1, Ramondre as my RB2, Tyjae Spears as my RB3, and then I had Jaleel and Braylon Allen to close out the room. From a draft capital perspective, it's pretty thin, but like Ramondre is just like chugging along, getting all the touches. He's the RB1. He's like getting me like sufficient RB points most weeks. Tyjae's a breakout bet. Jaleel's a kind of a breakout, like, you know, PPR type dude, you know, pass catcher guy. And then pure contingency flyer, Braylon Allen, and Achane is just like winning me weeks sometimes, right? So it's like, but I'm using Ramondre like I might have used a 4th round pick in 2021, but he cost me a 7th round pick or an 8th round pick. I think like that's one way we can use this, like where if you find yourself a little out of structure from something you did early, if you got an elite tight end, if you got an elite quarterback, if you got both, I think, you know, you can like grab one of these profiles, like a Conor, like a Mostert, like a Swift, like a Najee, these guys who are going to kind of fill the spot every week, and then use all the points up. He's hitting your lineup every week, and then you can like push your RB3 kind of past this zone. The other thing I would say is you can start pushing these quarterbacks as soon as Burrow. I'm getting Burrow sometimes around pick 100 these days. You know, maybe this is kind of the people that are drafting right now. Maybe this dries up. You know, you do sometimes see people take unstacked quarterbacks just because they fell 6 picks. That drafter usually has Saquon Barkley. But a lot of times you get Joe Burrow, you know, you can see him push. It's basically you and the Higgins drafter. So you just check where the Higgins drafter is, or if you're the Higgins drafter, check where the Chase drafter is. And you can push him sometimes pretty far. Burrow, you can do that to either make sure you're in structure at wide receiver, or make sure you're in structure or scoop one of these falling running backs. But like kind of all throughout this range, you can start pushing the quarterbacks. You can push Caleb a little bit. You can definitely push Purdy. You can push Trevor pretty far. You can push Tua really far. And then Herbert, you can get Herbert at like pick 140 double stacked. I mean, if you're taking Dolphins, Jaguars, Chargers, 49ers, you know, I like to have, I'm kind of targeting guys on those teams anyway, but when I have them, I'm planning on pushing that quarterback unless like I don't have any quarterbacks and I'm feeling really set at the other positions.
Yeah, that's how I like to do it as well. If I don't have a quarterback, and it depends on the number of outs that I have set up. Like there's from the early part of the board, you can get into some really incredible spots where you have 5 very good stackable quarterbacks going in this range. Yeah. And so you just say, room, you dictate who I stack, but I'm going to wait to pull the trigger until you make me. And so the way that I'll play that is I just kind of sit on my hands and I will patiently wait until the number of viable stacked quarterbacks that I have in the hopper goes down to the point where I'm concerned that I'm not going to get 2 of them. So it depends on where you're sitting at in the room. Usually when I have like this plethora of really good QB stacking options in the middle rounds here, it's in the early to middle part of the draft board. And typically then, as soon as there's only 3 guys left, I'll take my first one. And then on the last 2, I'm just kind of paying attention to the room. Like, does anyone have a guy that they could stack with these guys? Is there anyone that's a lunatic, someone that's just taking random naked quarterbacks or taking a bunch of them for fun? But if you're in a sharp room, and this is the part of the draft too, where you start to get a quarterback pileup. And so you'll be here. There's the guys who have the elites, and sometimes they've even gotten their second quarterback and they're just done. They're not taking anyone. There's guys who, you know, they tapped their first guy and they've got a bunch of stacks set up later, so they're not really worried about it or pushing it. And you'll just get a big cluster. The 5 highest picks by ADP are all quarterback, and you can just, when that's the case, like, you almost know that they're going to keep falling. Like, that group of quarterbacks all together kind of insulates the whole room. Everyone feels safe about their quarterback. They're like, the top 5 picks are all quarterbacks. I'm good. I can push my guy. And that's a really good indicator. That's kind of the canary in the coal mine that, like, hey, don't jump the gun here, buddy. Just like play it, pay attention, try and extract as much value as you can out of this. Don't get too greedy, find the spot where you need to pull
you
the
don't
trigger.
want to miss the whole group. Yeah,
exactly. Don't miss the boat, but it's something where you can eke out some more value. And even if you're drafting off the rankings might tell you, hey, the quarterback's the best pick here by a lot. But if you've got, I'm sitting here looking at Trevor, Tua, Brock Purdy, Justin Herbert, and then I have some guys later that are options too. Like I might have emergency Daniel Jones, or I know that I've got Drake May that I'm happy to set up later, or Bo Nix or something like that. And if I'm in that spot, I'm just going to sit on my hands. I'm going to make you give me Tua at 140, give me Tua at 150. And I've gotten a number of teams with that much quarterback value.
Yeah, Tua at 140 is a real thing. I would also say that these guys are pretty equivalent to each other once you start stacking. So like Purdy single stacked versus Trevor double stacked or triple stacked, give me Trevor. I've done that. I've taken Trevor over Purdy, even though by the ranks we've got Purdy, decently ahead, and by ADP you're getting a full round of value if you take Purdy. But if you have Trevor Lawrence double stacked, I think he's more valuable. Tua, same thing. Like if you've got Tyreek and Waddle or Kittle, I think I want Tua. I would take Tua over Purdy there. So that's another reason where like these guys are pretty even with one another, depending, or they flip each other depending on how you've built. So that's one reason to push these guys, because the order might change for you once you've built your team out a little bit. One thing about these guys too, I think in general, I think the Chargers are a pretty good team to be targeting. I think Ladd is a pretty decent target. I think Palmer's perfectly fine. And then I really like Herbert, but I'll play it from the other side too. There's one receiver that I've drafted more than Rashee Rice. It's Jalen Polk. I'm drafting a ton of Jalen Polk. He gives you draft capital, decent, profile, not amazing, but lands in a totally wide open depth chart, and pretty high ceiling sort of situation if Drake May is good by the end of the season, right? Late season upside, I think very clearly there for Polk, because you get, what if Drake May's really good, right? If Polk's really good, all of a sudden this could hit in a really outsized way. But it's already set up for you when you go with the Chargers. So if you're pushing Herbert and you get sniped, all right, I immediately go to the Patriots. If you push Tua and he gets sniped, you can play it on the other side with the Browns, right? You can backdoor stack that to a degree if you're willing to take Jerry Jeudy. If you're not, you may need to have already taken Amari Cooper or David Njoku. So you can kind of from the Jags side, you can go with the Titans. That's a little harder to backdoor stack, but if you've got like Hopkins or something like that, if you've got Tyjae Spears, even, you can go play it with Will Levis. So these quarterbacks are just like really perfectly set up to kind of push and get good prices on for a number of reasons. Any thoughts on the backdoor stacking elements for these guys? Are you guys as excited about these as I am, or you guys are not taking up just a truckload of Drake May right now?
Drake May, I think, is my highest drafted quarterback right now. I've actually been trying to take more Will Levis. I just like
me too,
that.
Actually, yeah.
I like that spot a lot. I think it's set up pretty well. Yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of these backdoor stacking options. The one that I probably don't have enough of is JJ McCarthy. I want to try to not be overly confident that he's just nothing special. Like, I just want to bet on the fact that Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver of this era, can elevate JJ McCarthy and just make him viable. But yeah, I take a ton of Drake May. I take a lot of Will Levis, and I'm trying to take more. I take a good amount of Bo Nix. And yeah, it's just all those guys feel pretty good to me.
One guy I would note, just when we talk about pushing guys, I'm not really pushing Daniels because you take his guys after him and he's a runner. And if you need Daniels, you might need him. And I don't really push Love because you take his guys after and pretty quickly after. So you might take Love and then try to grab Dobbs the very next round, for example. So those two guys I'm not really pushing of these guys. But yeah, the backdoor stacks, I think. What about Nix? Where are you guys at on Nix?
I think
Most drafted quarterback.
He's your most drafted quarterback?
It's really hard to project how quarterbacks do in the NFL. We always think we are so smart when we do this. And then Justin Herbert, the no ceiling guy, is a 5,000-yard passer or whatever. He's probably the best bet. I mean, he's absolutely the best bet of the non-Caleb, Jaden guys to start every single game. And he's also easily the most predictable in terms of where his targets are going to go. I'd say I don't want to get too over my skis. All the signs point to Marvin Mims playing a meaningful role in the offense. We saw time and time again last year. Oh, we can't get Marvin Mims involved. There's just not a role for him. And then right before, maybe it's right after they trade Jerry Jeudy, coincidentally, Marvin Mims, I don't know if you guys knew this, he plays the Jeudy role, and that's why he wasn't playing very much. You don't have to have the entire board with the little red pegs and strings everywhere to see, probably a guy they want to get involved more. Maybe he doesn't end up being good, and it doesn't matter, right? But they clearly have an intention of getting him the ball. Troy Franklin, we talked about. The path is clear. He's another one I don't want to get too out over my skis on a 4th-round pick. Those guys don't play all the time. It just happens. But then Courtland Sutton we have is underpriced guy who's going to get a lot of targets. And we love the running backs too.
We love the running backs. Yeah,
we love the running backs too. And not only do we love the running backs, but as far as I know the correlation between the quarterback and the running back, even within a game, isn't extremely strong. This is an offense that has extremely prioritized throwing to the running back. So there is probably more correlation in that sense, slightly, but is more than some of the other quarterback to running back connections. So I think it's the easiest one on the entire board to just, once you get past halfway through the draft, I have a lot of combos to do it. And I don't feel like I'm drawing dead when I'm I stacked Javon Baker and Drake May. Javon Baker might be a healthy scratch game. I like him. I also don't know if he's one of the 5 highest route runners on that team. I feel better. Not perfect. We still get curveballs, especially from Sean Payton. But I do feel better about predicting where the targets are going to go for that team. Admittedly, May is my second highest owned quarterback, so I like them both a lot.
Yeah, I'd have more Bo Nix if he didn't have the same bye week as Drake May.
He also has the same, I believe, same bye week as Lamar as well, which I've
and
forgotten
Stroud.
that. Yeah, I've forgotten that mid-draft and worked myself into a corner.
I'd have more both of them if they didn't share those bye weeks. Yeah.
Yes, I would too. They're already my 2 highest. May and Nix are my 2 highest rostered quarterbacks, and I would only be able to find ways to get more if they didn't pair quite poorly with some of the quarterbacks I like early.
The other guy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Pat.
2 things on Nix would be, one, another reason to push Burrow, because you can play it from the other side with Nix, which maybe seems super sick, but I actually think this is a viable, especially if you're going to then get, a Herbert, if you end up with a Herbert, a Levis and a Nix. Okay, that seems pretty good. The other thing with Nix that I would say, compared to last year, the late round quarterbacks, they offers upside, but a lot of job uncertainty. Ritter, Howell, these guys were going to get benched, I thought, and did get benched. And that's not the case here. We're worried about early season stuff with Drake May, and we're not at Kyle. I mean, I completely agree. Nix is starting every game. So you're getting job security, price per start. Bo Nix is probably the cheapest quarterback in the pool. So
he quite literally has to be. Maybe Daniel Jones could give him a run for his money, but I'm not projecting Daniel Jones for 17. I'm going to project him for 14 and a half. I'm projecting Nix for 17.
Engine guarantees.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I think that's a really good one. Sorry, go ahead, Sack, you had a point.
I was just gonna say the other guy down here that I'm happy to use as like a late quarterback out is Geno Smith. You got a lot of receivers that can open him up earlier. You got three very viable guys. You have Noah Fant. I'm happy to take both of his running backs. I think they're both priced pretty well. So yeah, really, I mean, Geno, Levis, McCarthy's the one that I don't get enough of. Honestly, yeah, all 6 of these quarterbacks are guys that I like. I just like taking bets on these teams that are really underpriced, because if you have a portfolio where you're at the very least even with the field on all 6 of these guys, even if just one of them wins, if one of these teams is the team where it's like, oh no, the market mispriced them, the win you get for that is so disproportionate in the value that it brings your portfolio that you're just laughing straight to the bank. You know, the rest of you, 5 out of the 6 quarterbacks are what we thought they are, and they stink, but one of them's good. You're like, yeah, I'd do that every time. Like, I'm ready to do it again next year. And that's what happened last year. You know, like CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy were really good. Kenny Pickett and Desmond Ridder were pretty bad. Sam Howell was like good up until the playoffs, and then that really was painful for you, you know. But like for the guys that hit, like the hit is such a large win because of how discounted everything is around them.
Everything's discounted. You can correlate the whole offense, and it ends up being like Drake May good, massive win. Bo Nix good, massive win. Geno Smith good in this new offense, massive win. Bryce Young good. That one I have a harder time getting there on, but we're willing to take him. We're above ADP on Bryce Young because he's starting all the games, and you know Derek Carr, where he's starting all the games, and I guess he has like a hair more bench risk than the other guys, but his contract keeps him in place next year. So he'll very likely be starting. And so you're getting like, this year feels a lot better. The late round quarterbacks just feel a lot better. You're getting late season path to them being out there starting for you. And you know, there's not a ton of opportunity cost in like the traditional quarterback window, but the running backs are so well priced, as we discussed, that it is worth pushing, and these guys can bail you out. We should wrap up here. Any late round, like the very last rounds, 18th round, non-quarterback stuff, like how are you guys tacking on like veteran wide receivers? Are you going hunting for like a rookie? I've been taking some Jalen McMillan, that kind of pick, Devontae Walker. I am taking some of these running backs now, like Braylon Allen, some of these guys who are starting to look like they might have the RB2, but how are you guys handling like your 18th round?
Yeah, you know, death, taxes, and drafting 18th round Darius Slayton once again. It's
I'm taking him too. Yeah,
you know what you're getting. Like, he's not going to lead the Giants in receiving yards this year, though he's done it 4 of the past 5 years. He's just like going to run routes, and that's as near of a certainty as you can find this late. If you want to draft some of the upside rookie wide receivers, that's good. I think Demarcus Robinson's a really strong pick that he's exiting the round 18 group. But again, the quarterbacks are really nice picks late.
He's moving up. We're behind. We like him, but he's getting a little more expensive.
And if we're talking Broncos, you know, Josh Reynolds probably going to be running a lot of routes there if needed. You're out of players you want to stack, you know, Bo Nix. Maybe you had Marvin Mims a few rounds before. Take Josh Reynolds in the 18th if you're really sick.
So someone get this taste out of my mouth, please.
I've been mixing in some Deonta Foreman. I click a lot of CEH. Definitely started clicking more Braylon Allen as we got more news out of camp.
That's exciting. That's different. CEH did not change the palette. It was not a palette cleanser for me.
Demarcus Robinson too, actually. I'll take him more when I've got a lot of like rookie firepower already on a team. But I think Demarcus Robinson's actually a pretty good click. Jalen McMillan, Devontae Walker, I like both of those guys. I'll mix Tolbert in occasionally, but I think the probability that he's bad is pretty high.
Yeah.
But he's, you know, we are getting a decent amount of information that he's probably the Cowboys wide receiver 3. So whatever, I'll mix him in.
Yeah, that guy, same type of thing for me as Khalif Raymond. He's almost certain, like I'm more confident that he is the wide receiver 3 on his team in Detroit. And we also all of us are just really over this Jameson Williams experiment. And also, I don't know if the Lions are not over this Jameson Williams experiment. So we have even less. We also have a lot of lack of faith in Brandon Cooks, but they're great spots where like the second guy might not be good either. And we know he's locked in to be the third guy. Feels like a pretty good bet to make when we're talking about guys who are going around them could just be weekly healthy scratches.
Braylon Allen is going to be out of the 18th round, I think, pretty soon, but he's there now. Izzy Abanikanda, I think, is on track to be cut. He's completely fallen down the depth chart that it looks like. Yeah. And Allen looks to be running ahead of Isaiah Davis, who would probably be his main competition to be the RB2. So I could see Allen coming up into this range, the Bucky Irving 150, 160 type of range. I think this is the week. If you're drafting this week, I would be looking to get Braylon Allen in the 18th round. Just getting ahead of, I think, and maybe it doesn't happen very quickly. Maybe this price just lingers until training camp. But I think we're getting he's the RB2 in training camp. The price will change substantially once we get that. So he's probably my favorite 18th round pick right now. And actually like someone that you can dream on a little bit, as a contingent value, obviously, but a bigger back could be like a really nice fill-in that you're getting very cheaply. And I think probably a higher floor than it feels like, given the way they've been talking about Abanikanda. I don't think he's going to challenge for the RB2 role. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Drico had to drop due to some technical difficulties. But yeah, check out the rankings on legendaryupside.com. Check out legendaryupside.com/perks to see how you can get a $50 underdog credit with a yearly subscription. And we'll see you next time. We're going to be doing these pods every week as we talk through the rankings and then jump on to do a pod. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.